What am I talking about this morning? Talking about anger. A couple of weeks back, talked about anger and not in any way thinking that in these couple of messages everything that needs to be said is being said. But I just think there are some things that are good for us to know. Last weekend, Teresa and I were in Sydney for Matt and Megan's wedding. We married a whole week and a day. And the wedding part of it went, I think, fairly well. I mean, it was very cold. And there were rabbits. When you live in Queensland a long time, you don't see rabbits. No. But New South Wales, rabbits breed like rabbits. and so there were just rabbits all over the place. But the whole weekend, that for us, in a sense, could have been a very relaxing weekend. Now, the wedding part of it went really well, but we found ourselves just through our time down there in the midst of a very intense situation that took an enormous amount of praying and an enormous amount of wisdom to be able to just work in and help and just minister the grace of God in all kinds of different situations. And then we were coming home Sunday evening, came into Sydney, arrived at Sydney Airport, and as we're checking our bags in, the lady behind the monitor, she's click, 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 click. And she's waiting a long time, and I'm thinking, this isn't good. Click, click. And she starts looking round, like, where can I run? No, this isn't good. And I said, is something wrong? And she said, you can't go on this flight. And I said, we have our seats booked. It's not like we've got particular seats booked. She said no. She said Virgin overbooked flights. Most of the companies overbook flights. One time flew with Qantas and they overbooked the flight. And they said you can't fly on this flight. We couldn't fly on the next flight. We couldn't fly on the next flight. I think it was the next flight again, which was more than an hour late leaving. So it was an interesting situation, but in the midst of that, because we were both feeling pretty tired and feeling, just a little bit stretched, the fact that they overbooked could have created a certain amount of anger. And Teresa was so composed, so gracious, so compassionate, that I thought, I can't be anything but. And then the lady looked at us and said, we will give you two $32 vouchers to have tea. Oh, that's good. We did find that a very limited number of places at Sydney Airport would actually honour the vouchers. Very limited number. But be that as it may, they actually offered us a $100 discount on a future flight, but we've got to use it in such a short time that that's probably not something we can do. But it was just an interesting situation because circumstances reveal what's in our heart. Now we think, those circumstances cause a reaction, but circumstances just show you what's already inside you. And just certain circumstances bring it out. And even though we blame the circumstances, it isn't the circumstances, it's what's going on inside us. I am a phlegmatic personality, I'm fairly laid back, I'm not being a sort of someone easily given over to anger. Teresa would be far less so, or more so, whichever way you look at that. It would take far more to bring her to any kind of anger than it would take me. But even for me, it takes an enormous amount to actually bring me to some kind of expression of anger. But that was not always the case. And when children come into your life, and then you find there are all kinds of stretching things going on, and then when they become teenagers, those stretching things can become explosive. And I found suddenly that gentle Geoff, meek and mild, who looks upon a little child, when the child became a teenager, the meek and mildness disappeared. And I found that I would get angry in all kinds of situations. Now, you've never done that. And I found, and I was so disturbed by my angry responses in all kinds of situations, that I really wanted before God to actually begin to deal with my own anger. So what I did, perhaps God put this in my heart, or I just put it in my heart. But I began to ask myself when I get angry 3 different questions. Those 3 questions are up there. First one, I'd ask, why am I angry? Then I'd ask a second one, do I have a right to be angry? And then a third question, what am I going to do about it? And I found that for me personally, these 3 questions really helped me begin to look at my own anger and then begin to sort it through. But before we actually look at these 3, we're going to take them one by one this morning. I want to just touch on some other elements that might leave us close to an anger threshold. You know how like there's a threshold, and then we might be here and it's all good, but then something happens and it brings us here, and it's a bit dicey, and then we're here and we're right on our anger threshold. And then you know how when you're there it doesn't take too much to take you over the top, does it? No, it doesn't take much because you're really close to your threshold. So let me just talk about some things that are outside of just the circumstance itself that we have responded in anger with. Obviously modelling, if you've had a parent or parents who expressed a lot of anger, it's far more likely that you too will be someone who expresses and shows anger a lot more easily. It just happens like that. Another part of that is tiredness. Have you found, do you ever get tired? Yeah. I mean, like tiredness is like this is life 24/7 for many people. And when we get tired, we get angry more easily. Have you noticed that? Because everybody else has noticed it about you. So I'm just hoping you've noticed it too. When you get tired, you can get angry far more easily. When there's been sickness and you've been sick for some time and you haven't got as much energy and all this, you find that little things that ordinarily mightn't upset you as much will make you angry. Sorry, go back to the next one. Worry. If we're worried about things and we haven't found ways and means to relieve that worry, then we'll find too, like if you haven't listened to the message a couple of weeks back where I talked about worry, and if you listen to it, you should have no more worries. Is that true? I see Kay's look of absolute shock and horror, so maybe that wasn't the wisest thing to say. Grief. When people go through grief, anger is part and parcel of grief. I'm going to comment a bit more about that in a moment. Depression. Obviously, when a very strong sign of depression that doctors will look for and ask for, they will talk about your anger. Are you experiencing a lot more anger? And it can become a very clear sign of depression. Coming back to the grief one, I'm talking with someone in Sydney, and there'd been a situation that was a very difficult one for them, and I just said to them, I said, you realise that what you're going through is a grief situation. And they said, well, how's it a grief situation? Then I explained a little bit to them, and I said, so what are the main aspects? What are you feeling? And they said, well, when you go through grief, what do you go through? And I talked about the shock and the anger and then the various stages and how that works. And they said, I am in the anger part of it right now. And I was just trying to show them that the anger they were experiencing was in part because of the grief they were going through. Something else, again just here. I sat with anger long enough until she told me her real name was grief. And as I said, when people go through grief, there can be so much anger there. Being defensive. Sometimes people, they touch something in your life that you don't want touched. And rather than nicely saying, no, let's not go there, you respond abrasively. Have you ever done that? Yes. I'm sure many of us have done that. And then fear, people who are fearful too, there will be anger. Now, this is like a fruit salad where I'm just throwing out all kinds of bits and pieces, not trying to cover every single area, but I just want you to know that each of these areas will cause us to become very close to our anger threshold. So let's begin to just look at these three questions that really help me. Oh, does this look like anyone in church this morning? So the first question that I would ask myself, why am I angry? Now, it might seem like a strange thing to ask, because when we're angry, don't we know why we're angry? No. Many times we don't know exactly why we're angry. Most times we do, but sometimes it helps to be very specific. Why am I angry? Because sometimes we have floating anger. We have anger over something else that wasn't sorted out, and it's floating, and so we get angry a little bit later. Let me tell you how this happened to me. One of my kids, in fact, I probably shouldn't name any of them. All right, I won't. One of my kids, when our cat had kittens, literally, and we had said, don't take the kittens into your room, because the kittens had to be with Mama, who look after them and clean them up. And then that particular child had friends over, and so what do they all do? They all scoop up a bunch of kittens, take them into the room, and of course, kittens being kittens, they don't know where the bathroom is. So they're all up on the bed, all the kittens, and then, well, there's the story. So then that particular child tells me, oh, you know, they're all over the bed and everything. And now, because the friends are there, I can't say anything. I don't feel that I can kind of say anything. So I'm angry, but I can't do anything with this anger. I can't direct the anger. And then sometime later, and the friends stay there for some time, so I've got this floating anger. And a little bit later, that same delightful, wonderful child does something that is quite small. It's really not a significant thing. And I blow up. Now, why do I blow up? In fact, that person said to me, why are you angry? That's like nothing. And I think, yeah, but I couldn't correct you earlier when I wanted to, because your friends were there, and it was floating anger. So I learned, if I ask myself, why am I angry? I would have to go back and say, because you did the wrong thing earlier, because your friends were there, I couldn't correct you in front of your friends, I had floating anger. And I found numerous times in numerous situations, including in Sydney situations, where sometimes people react in a situation and it bears a lot of similarities to something they've been through previously. And if they said, why am I angry? And they ask God, God might remind them of something that happened earlier. And then they begin to think, so what's happening here is like what happened there. Sounds like I've lost sound. Am I?
Yes.
I have nothing here.
Don't get angry.
I need a big one. Wrong size batteries. Come on.
Wendy, don't get angry.
Thank you. Lights, camera, action.
Do pastors get angry?
Other pastors.
I know of a situation in a Pentecostal church, quite a sizable church too, where they had so much sound trouble over such a long period of time. One Sunday morning, when the microphone didn't work, that lead pastor threw the thing down and smashed it. And blasted the sound team publicly. He had two pastors, good-sized church. When they tried to talk to him about it, he fired both of them on the spot. So they began another church, and I don't know, half, 2/3 of the original church joined the other two. The senior pastor was going through burnout. But being Pentecostal, I don't know if he didn't believe in burnout or just felt God overrules all those things. Do pastors get angry?
Yes.
You better believe it. So, sometimes people who by nature don't easily correct, or we have this thinking that being a Christian means that we never get upset, are far more likely to have floating anger. People who just they just couldn't correct someone. Now, I don't mean you just correct a person you don't know, but I mean in a situation where you have a right to correct someone, but if you feel, oh no, as a Christian, I just cannot do that, you're more likely to have floating anger. A wife who feels that she cannot correct her husband is more likely to have floating anger. A husband who feels he can't correct his wife is more likely to have floating anger. So he would have to ask himself, she would have to ask herself, why am I angry? How many of you ever get angry driving? I had to meet someone this week down at Browns Plains, and I knew what time I had to leave by, and I was just doing stuff, and I just kept thinking, it'll be alright, and then suddenly I looked at my watch. My watch is in the habit of stopping a bit. It's not the battery, it's just something else. And then I suddenly realised that now I am running a bit behind. And so while I'm driving down, and of course the Logan motorway, with it, there's a lot of stuff going on, and everything is a little bit more compacted, and I find myself looking at my watch, looking at the clock, and I didn't quite get like this, but I felt something rising in me, and it wasn't pretty. And as I'm looking about that, I'm getting angry at the traffic, but who am I really angry at? I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at myself that I did not discipline myself to make sure that I left at a reasonable time, because traffic is traffic. And even though around here traffic is minimal, my goodness, in Sydney, it's unbelievable. But be that as it may, there are things that go on and we think I'm reacting to that, when in fact I'm reacting to something else. So my first question was, for myself, why am I angry? And it really did help me to ask that. Second question I'd ask myself, do I have a right to be angry? Do I have a right to be angry? One time, now I hope this hasn't happened to you, but hey, one time I found an almost empty bag, almost empty, of a little plastic bag of this green substance. Now I knew what it was, but I thought, hey, I had learned, because when you raise teenagers, you learn to dot every I and cross every T, because if you get something wrong, you are reminded of it thereafter. So I thought, how can I make sure what it is? I'll go to the cops. So I went to the cops and I said, what's this? And the guy looked at it and said, do you really want me to tell you? You don't know what it is? I said, I know what it is. I want you to tell me what it is. He said, he looked at it, he smelled it, he gave it a little taste. He said, it is what you think it is. I said, thank you. And he said, don't crash your car driving home, because if the police go through your car and find a little bag, you'll be in trouble. I said, that's all right. I know, I managed to get home without crashing the car. So when I confronted one of my kids over this, did they come back and say, oh Dad, you're such a wonderful father. How loving, how caring you are, how compassionate you are, that you didn't want me to get into trouble. So you took my little bag of marijuana and you took it to the police. That was so good of you. Oh, I want to give you a great big hug. Do you think that's how they reacted? I tell you, pigs would have flown that day if that had happened. I got blasted. You had no right to do that. I said, you had no right to bring that into our home. You had no right to do that. And went, oh, no. Oh, don't kids love you? So sometimes we have to think through, do I have a right to be angry? Did I have a right to be angry? Yes, I did. And as I thought it through, because I was going through this thing, what am I angry at? Do I have a right to be angry? Notify, I have a right to be angry. Because I don't want marijuana brought into my home. I don't want a situation, especially when I'd befriended so many people in the police force, especially Juvenile Aid Bureau. Can I just tell stories that are unscripted now? And then my wife later will say, you shouldn't have said that. I won't even look at it. I made a really good friend of the head of JAB, Juvenile Aid Bureau. I knew him by first name, sat down with him numerous times, talked to him about all kinds of things. And one time, one of my kids was a bit upset with me, as they often were, and said, I'm going to go to the police, and I'm going to tell them all kinds of stuff about you. And I said, that's great. Here's the phone number, which I knew off by heart. And I say, and ask for, and I named the particular person, and they said, who's that? I said, that's the head of the Juvenile Aid Bureau in Ipswich. That's the person you need to speak with. They said, how do you know? I said, I know him really well. I sit down with him frequently. Well, I don't think I'll go to the police anymore. Now, sometimes Christians draw on the fact that God gets angry as a defense. They say, look, God gets angry, so I have a right to be angry too. Let me just tell you a couple of things about God's anger in Scripture. Number one, it is not emotionally charged. God doesn't, sort of blow a gasket and then get angry because of that. Number two, it's directed against wrongdoing and generally not against people. What about your anger? Number three, it's always against sin and especially injustice. But yet, so many Western Christians, if you talk about injustice, they'll say, oh, you're a Labour supporter, are you? And I think, my goodness, can't you see in Scripture that it says so much about injustice? And that we need to be, as Christians, we need to get as angry at injustice situations. And we get angry about all this other stuff. Where they're going to bring in a late-term abortion and the Christians are just sitting there in this daze, and it's not a marijuana day. They're just a daze. And like we're sitting back thinking, oh, it'll all get sorted out. It won't all get sorted out unless we get angry. My God, we get angry against injustice. And then the fourth thing I just said, God's anger is always designed to bring us back to Himself. God's anger always designed to bring us back to Himself. So often we get angry when our comfort zone is upset. Oh, this is a hard one. I was catching up with someone this week and in part of Logan area, and they were just saying to me how they recognised that their father used to get upset with this guy. The person said to me, I said, guy, I better stay with that. He said his dad would get upset with his mum because the dad loved gardening, and he would say to his wife, when they go out gardening, come on, it'll be really good, John. And she'd say, yep. And then she would just get caught up with something else, and he would get angry. And then this is the son now growing up, and the son said in the early stages of marriage, he said, I suddenly realised I'd become just like my dad. That I'd say to my wife, let's do such and such, and she'd say, yep, and then he would start it, and then she'd just sit down and blob in front of the TV. You ever blob in front of the TV? Do I see a hand? I see 1.5 hands. So he would get upset, and then he realised, and he'd think, I'm just like my dad. But see, it was like each of them, like for the wife, for her to relax, she wanted to blob in front of a TV. That's how she relaxed. But the guy, he wanted them to do stuff together. That's how he found relaxation. So each of them have their comfort zones, what they feel comfortable with and they really enjoy. But it's different to each other. It's like love languages. You know, if you're living with someone, you've got to know their love language to understand how they think and what they're actually thinking. And I've often found that if I just want to do something that I feel comfortable with, and then someone wants me to do something that takes me out of my comfort zone, I find something rising up inside me. It's selfish and it's wrong, and it's like I want to be comfortable. I want my comfort zone, and if I thought about it, and then I go to hear stuff about take up your cross, and I think I want my comfort zone, and I know from me, and I've said to numerous people at this stage in my life, one of the biggest challenges from the Spirit of God is saying, Geoff, don't get comfortable. But everything within me is saying, I want to be comfortable. God, haven't I earned the right to be comfortable? He never says anything when I ask him. You know, he never says no, he never says yes. Like he just shakes his head and just walks away. Angels just deal with him. You know. All right. So, sometimes we get angry too because we have expectations of life and of people, and those expectations are dashed by how things really are. And I've got to really think it through. Do I have a right to be angry with someone if I have an expectation of them that was unrealistic? Now, Matt and Megan, married for 8 days. Oh, it's still honeymoon. Oh my goodness, if you guys weren't here, I could milk this so much. It's like the celebrant for the marriage says, I now pronounce you man and wife, which I did. I got that part right. We repeated half the vows twice, but never mind. And it's like Jesus said the two become one, and it's a pronouncement, and then for the rest of their lifetime, the Holy Spirit works on making two people one. How many know it's easier to make the pronouncement than to see two become one? Oh, yes it is. Don't worry, I'm not looking at my wife, I'm looking at all of you. It's really funny. Someone will come up later and say, oh Geoff, you need healing of the memories for that. No. I can still remember the first person who left this church angry at me. I can still remember them. They're still alive. And even though this was like I don't know, 40 odd years back, I can still remember them up in the top floor, 5th floor, and this person, they took a piece out of me and said what they said. It's funny, I can still remember that. Now they had an expectation of me that I could not fulfill for them. And I didn't fulfill that expectation. The church didn't fulfill an expectation they had. Maybe it was an unreal expectation, but they reacted in anger. So when they left, they left angrily. I have seen the person many times since, and I've always been courteous, and believe you me, there's been complete forgiveness in my own heart. Let me just say that. I don't need healing of the memories. You got that?
Okay.
Don't want the whole healing of the memories team lining up later. Geoff, we want to have a talk to you. You can't fire us. All right, a third question, last question. All right, so I'm saying, first of all, why am I angry? I've got to really kind of, work this thing through. I've got to think this through. Do I have a right to be angry? Last question, what am I going to do about it? All right, what am I going to do about it? The number one thing, the very first thing that I have to do when there's an angry situation, whether it's justified, I feel my anger is legitimate, if I feel I have a right to it, I must forgive. Forgiveness is the absolute number one foundation. If there's not forgiveness, you will never ever get free of anger. You'll never get free of anger. The Passion Translation for Colossians 3:12 says, tolerate the weaknesses of those in the family of faith. Hey, that means us. It means tolerate each other's weaknesses. Is that more easily said than done?
Yes.
One honest person down there, thank you. And then it says, forgiving one another in the same way you have been graciously forgiven by Jesus Christ. And I was thinking about this, that I'm thinking of the thousands of times that God has forgiven me because of my wrongdoing. And then someone does something, and if I do not forgive them, but He's forgiven me thousands of times for all my wrongdoing, but I will not forgive another person. And that's why God says unforgiveness just becomes like a shut door. And then so much stuff goes wrong if there's unforgiveness, because we fail to get hold of the fact that God has forgiven us for everything we've done wrong. But we refuse to show the same grace toward another person. So the verse goes on. If you find fault with someone, release the same gift of forgiveness to them. My goodness, the same gift of forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is a decision, it is not a feeling. Now I would find when someone chews me out or someone upsets me in some way, I find myself reliving a conversation. Now, you've never ever done that, have you? And you think through, this is what I could have said, this is what I should have said. Oh, they said that. Oh, what if I'd said this? And it would go through my mind and through my mind and through my mind. And for some of you, this is a revelation because it never happened to you. But for others, it's how you live. You relive it, you rethink it. Go through your mind, through your mind, through your mind, through your mind. And so when this is happening, I have to make a decision to forgive the person who has upset me in some way. It doesn't mean they're right and I'm wrong. It doesn't mean I'm right and they're wrong. It's simply for God's sake and for my sake that I forgive them. Anyone you don't forgive, biblically from Matthew 18, you put them into a prison, and your unforgiveness puts you into a prison. And that's the story Jesus told in Matthew 18 of the unforgiving servant. You're in a prison, and they're in a prison until you release forgiveness. Now, in the vast majority of cases where we've been angry at someone, forgiving them is as far as we can go and need to go. Sometimes there are cases where talking with the person we've been angry at is helpful, though let me say very few, very few. If that is the case, can I direct the anger against the problem and not against the person? Can you get angry at the problem and not the person? And there may be cases, if it's a parent to a child, say, where you have to confront in some way, it might be a husband and wife situation. Let me just mention three things that will really, really help this go well. Number one, when you talk to them, when the corrective situation, that it is gentle. It is gentle. Can I just read Galatians 6:1, again from the Passion translation? It says, "My beloved friends, if you see a believer who's overtaken with a fault, may the one who overflows with the Spirit seek to restore him. Win him over with gentle words, which will open his heart to you." Gentle words that will open his heart to you. I remember when I was a university student and I was backslidden, and I was involved in some pretty more extreme student politics. And I remember going to a Christian meeting, university Christian meeting. I would go every now and then. And there was a guy there for the very first time who was introduced to me, and he said, "You're the guy who's involved in the anti-conscription stuff and all that?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "Can I talk to you?" I said, yeah. So he came round to the place where I stayed, and he said, "Look, I'm just having a lot of trouble understanding the position that you've taken from the Bible. I'm just having a lot of trouble. Can you explain to me your thinking and explain to me how you came to this position?" And he was so gentle. He was so gentle. He didn't say, "Oh, look, mate, Romans 13:1, obey the governing authority. Look, it's wrong. What do you think that would have done to me?" Wouldn't have done anything. He was so gentle. And because of his gentle approach, it began to prod at me and began to make me think, I wonder whether I'm taking the right pathway. So the first one, if you do talk with someone, gentle. Next one, that when you talk with someone, that you are loving. I'll just read from Hebrews 12, and it's quoting Proverbs 3, again from the Passion translation. "My child, don't underestimate the value of the discipline and training of the Lord God, or get depressed when He has to correct you. For the Lord's training of your life is the evidence of His faithful love. His training, His correction, the Lord's training of your life is the evidence of His faithful love. And so when someone sits down with you, and if you're in a place where you are talking with someone who's made you angry in some way, first one I was saying that you're gentle, second one loving, and then third one, correction works best when it's relational. Relational. That's why, when a child is naughty, who's the best person to correct that child? A parent. A parent. I remember, I don't know, a couple of years back when we were having a bigger problem with children being very noisy during the meeting and different people taking different stance. And I remember talking just from the front and saying, hey, if you're someone who gets really upset with noisy children, believe you me, you're not the one to correct. And some people go, oh, well, you're not the one because you're upset by it. And see, what's needed is someone who can get beside the parent and work in with the parent. Someone who's gracious, someone who's loving. Because the best correction is someone who has relationship with you. They're the best correction situation. There are just so many stories here. I just want to take one. I remember one time doing a ladies' meeting, way back, early days of this church. Our ladies' group was quite sizable. And there was a lady there for the very, very first time. Now, after the meeting, she made a beeline for me, and she went through everything that I had, that I should have said that I didn't say. And believe you me, it was a long list. I tried to explain to her I was doing an introductory talk on an area that I was not trying to cut everything. No. You should have mentioned and then you left out and went on and on. Now this person had no relationship with me. I'd never seen this person before, never met this person before. And do you think that was helpful for me? Now this person then made a wrong decision, and their wrong decision was to make this church their church. So this thing within them continued for all the time they were in this church. And they had this thing where they just felt if I left something out, now they didn't do it as bad